What is up, guys? Welcome back to CageChat MMA. We're here for, of course, the UFC 270 preview. We've got an absolute heavyweight banger on the card tonight with Francis Ngannou versus Ciryl Gane. We've also got, of course, the Flyweight Championship on the line. The trilogy between Brandon Moreno coming as champion this time against Deiveson Figueiredo. It's an absolute corker of the pay-per-view in terms of the title fights that we're being served up tonight. Of course, the card as a whole has taken a battering, especially this week. We lost Ilia Topuria, of course, who was fighting in the replacement of Ciryl Gane. We lost that fight yesterday, of course. But we still got a cracking headline, a cracking co-main event, and a lot of narratives and, pathways and stories that this fight and tonight is going to bring us. Some are going to be concluding, but some also are going to be starting and continuing. Of course, this main event sort of built together, didn't it, at the start of the year with, of course, Ngannou dethroning Stipe Miocic as the heavyweight champion with a vicious second round knockout, and then of course the back and forth and the dislike between either Ngannou or the management and the UFC brought in this interim title shot. Of course, we was expecting the rematch between Derek Lewis versus Francis Ngannou in Houston. Of course, UFC or Francis Ngannou didn't want to fight that soon, and he had a legit claim to that. Of course, he was in Cameroon taking his title back to his homeland, etc. And he wanted to take some time off, which was rightfully so in his career. So we've got Ciryl Gane versus Derek Lewis. Now, the real loser in that was Derek Lewis, of course. Ciryl Gane defeated Derek Lewis via stoppage in the second round, of course, to move to 10-0. Oh, third round stoppage. My apologies. But he finished Derek Lewis. Derek Lewis had a very bad night in his hometown. And Ciryl Gane sort of confirmed what we thought and what we knew as fans, is that he's the elite of this heavyweight division at the moment. Of course, we're going through this period where we've got some of the old guys being filtered out, we've got the new guys coming up, and some of them maybe being rushed up. We thought Ciryl Gane might be getting rushed up. Of course, he's taken a few leaps up in competition since making his debut back in 2019. Of course, we know he's only been in the sport for 3-4 years maximum. Coming out of the MMA factory in Paris, of course, with Fernando Lopez, former coach and trainer of Francis Ngannou. Of course, the story of Francis Ngannou came from Cameroon, moved his way over to France, of course, to start a better life for himself. He wanted to get into boxing, met up with Fernando Lopez, and they went down the MMA route instead, and he's taken the world by storm, of course. An absolute monster, a knockout artist. He's finished the likes of Rosenstruck, JDS, Cain Velasquez. Of course, he had that first fight against Stipe, where we found out not his limits, but we found out where he was at that moment in his time. He took that title fight a bit too soon. It was just 3 weeks after that Overeem knockout, a highlight knockout, which really put him on the world's notice, so to speak. Knocking out a veteran like Alistair Overeem. But since then, he's only spent, he's only spent maybe 10 minutes in the octagon at most. I know it was about a 2-minute mark, I think, 2 or 3 minute mark before the rematch with Stipe. So he's on about 10 minutes. Whereas, Ciryl Gane has gone 3 rounds with Derek Lewis. He has gone 5 rounds with Alexander Volkov. He has gone 5 rounds with Josina Rosenstruck. He went for the second round with the Santos, of course. So despite having 9 fewer fights going into this one, he's actually spent more time in the octagon. His average time in the octagon is about 15 minutes, so over 3 rounds, whereas Ngannou is only around about the 5-minute mark, I believe. So there's a disparity in terms of octagon time and octagon experience. Of course, Ngannou is very quick and extremely damaging at what he does with his job, but he doesn't and hasn't spent a lot of time in the octagon as a whole. At most, he spent the 25 minutes with Stipe where he lost that fight. But majority of the wins do come in the first round. He knocked out Rosenstruck in the first round, 20 seconds. 1 minute 11 with JDS, 26 seconds with Cain, 45 seconds with Curtis Blades. So he's had 2 fights that he's lost that have gone to decision. That's Derek Lewis and Stipe Miocic, of course. So 15 minutes and 25 minutes there. So what's that? 40 minutes of time in the octagon from his losses. So the sort of the data and the statistics of Francis Ngannou's career inside the octagon is that if you take him outside that second round, your chances of winning almost double. Well, I say almost double, they significantly rise, don't they? With the tiredness of those big muscles, the lactic acid going in there, the lack of power, the loss of power. Um, but of course, that was a Francis Ngannou that was still, I believe, at the MMA factory, hadn't gone over to Eric Nicksick, and we saw the changes in the development in Francis Ngannou's game back in March when we noticed the takedown defense of Francis Ngannou against Stipe Miocic in that rematch in that first round, and then you're looking at going, oh wow, we've got a different Francis Ngannou here. We've got Francis Ngannou who's a lot more patient, a lot more methodical, a lot more tactile in when and how he throws his punches. Before, if you look at the Rosenstruck fight, he just went in there like a, he was looking there to switch lights off. There was no sort of tactics or plan or anything behind it other than throwing a big heavy right hand. And he was this close sometimes to being connected with by Rosenstruck, and it could have been a different result. But under Eric Nicksick and training Extreme Control, we've seen a development in Ngannou. It's interesting to see now, 10 months later and 10 months more advanced into that training cycle where he is. Of course, we know Ciryl Gane is the technician going into this bout, and Ngannou is so much been touted as the power going into this bout. But I think both of them, Ciryl Gane is a different type of MMA fighter, but I think there's both technique in there. Of course, Francis Ngannou finished or started the sport quite late, so he's still learning that technique and that intricacy of the sport, whereas Ciryl Gane seems to be quite naturally gifted as an athlete, quite naturally gifted into this sport. And it reminds me a bit like Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury. We're seeing, that trilogy play out, but it was always Deontay Wilder, the power man, hasn't really got any sort of technique. It's more of he's going to be dangerous for 11, 12 rounds, and if he lands his right hand on you, you're going to drop. And that Tyson Fury, it's going to outwork you, he's going to be able to out game plan you almost and be able to get you over 12 minutes and get a decision, which we saw happen in that in that first fight. It was a draw, of course, and then subsequently 2 finishes for Tyson Fury. And I wish this tonight is a big night. It's interim title that's undisputed for the unification belt, but it should be a fight where the whole world sits down and goes, "Wow, we've got 2 heavyweight monsters on our hand." It should be looked at in the same sort of view that boxing and the world looked at boxing and gone, "We've got Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder. Let's sit down, everyone order that, and let's watch." Especially with the story with Ngannou, especially with the story of Ciryl Gane. Now these 2 have gone back and forth this week, which has been interesting to sort of determine how close to weight they were. There was a lot of talk about them being training partners. I think Ngannou's come out and said we weren't really training partners. It was like a couple sessions here and there. He then said, I knocked out Ciryl Gane with a head kick in training. Just come and said that didn't happen. And this is where the magic of this fight really takes place. Is were they training partners? Were they not training partners? Usually when you get 2 former training partners come together, there's usually one that's going into this fight knowing, or both of them knowing, but one's going in, they're going, oh, I've got the better of him through the majority of the training sessions, and that can boost your confidence. Whereas the other guy are going, oh, he's taken me a couple of times to train, and maybe that derails his confidence, so to speak, or it can push him on to train even harder. But it seems like maybe Francis Ngannou is maybe going a bit too far with the truth. Maybe he's stretching out. Maybe that's his own sort of safety going into this fight, not to go too far, or maybe using it as a motivation to almost push the boundaries of the truth. Whereas Ciryl Gane coming in very level-headed, but maybe that's him almost denying it, so he can also keep that edge going into Saturday night, or going into night, shall we say? It's only a few hours away, of course. So it is it's an intriguing battle. It's intriguing. Fernando Lopez will know Francis inside out, but does he know this Francis Ngannou inside out? The Ngannou has been training under Extreme Control for the past 12 months, maybe longer. But let's have a look at the tail tape, of course. We have got 16-3 against 10-0, perfect record there for Ciryl Gane. Both of them 6'4". There was a 10-pound difference on the scales yesterday, with Ngannou coming in at 257, slightly lighter than he thought Stipe would. Of course, Stipe was about 234, 235, maybe 240 maximum in their fight, in their rematch. But of course, he's lost a little bit. Ciryl Gane's a heavier competitor, although he's a much quicker competitor than Stephen Miocic. He's probably less wrestling heavy, of course, than the kickboxing background. So it's gonna be a real, it's a real mouth-watering contest, and it should be everywhere. You shouldn't be able to turn a corner without seeing that we've got a heavyweight title match happening tonight between two of the baddest men on the planet. Of course, you know, it's a really tough one to predict. I've been watching all the previews, especially from BT Sport and Fight Disciples, and you can imagine Ngannou knocking him out in one and round two. You can imagine Ciryl Gane picking him apart for 5 rounds, like he did Jairzinho at Rosenstruck, making Rosenstruck almost gun shy. Maybe I don't think Ngannou's got that sort of ability to be gun shy, but he certainly was more methodical in that second fight with Steve Miocic. And if he's more methodical and maybe a bit too patient, maybe to land that right hand, wary of what Ciryl Gane brings to the table, maybe Ciryl Gane can point him out of the bout. Or is it going to be more so that Ngannou gasses himself out after 10-15 minutes and then Ciryl Gane can get the finish? It is a really, really interesting battle of what's going to happen between these two. And you are just missing that location. I wish this fight would have been in Paris. Of course, we've got UFC London booked now, but of course with Europe and the world, etc., still dealing with COVID, this fight should have been in Paris. It should have been, the UFC's first entry into France. With MMA now legal in France, of course, it was legalized maybe late 2020 with MVP and Ross Houston fighting there with Bellator, of course. But the UFC still need to make that venture out there. And if Ciryl Gane wins tonight, they're definitely going to make that venture out there. Maybe book a rematch or take John Jones or Stipe over there, perhaps. Or maybe Tom Aspinall if he beats Volkov this week at UFC London. Who knows? But I want to say Ciryl Gane. My heart's almost, it's 50-50. I like both of these guys, Francis Ngannou, because of the story and the sort of place he's put himself in the UFC and MMA now. He is probably the scariest guy on the roster with the power that he throws. And of course, we don't know how long he's going to be on the roster for. There's a lot of talk in his contract. Obviously, him wanting to be paid more. Of course, him maybe be on his last fight, but if he wins tonight, it's on a rolling contract, so he has to fight one more time. Him wanting to venture into boxing, and Dana White not seeing eye to eye with that. Let's talk about the Tyson Fury fight. I don't think that's something that's going to happen, especially if Ngannou loses tonight. It's certainly not going to happen. But these two, are going to put on a show tonight, and I'm glad it's in a crowd and not in the apex of the sold out or limited capacity crowd. This is one of those fights and one of those nights that you're going to say, I remember when that had happened, and it could be Ngannou became maybe the biggest superstar on the planet, or Ciryl Gane unlocked the world through himself and born and birthed a new era for the heavyweights with a much more lighter, tactile heavyweight rather than a bludgeoning power that is Francis Ngannou and some of the previous champions that we've seen and heavyweights that we've seen in the sport. Maybe it could be Ciryl Gane who opens up maybe a cruiserweight limit at 240. As a lighter competitor, maybe you could see definitely 240, 235 getting a weight class for itself. I believe that should happen. Anyway, with the gap that happens between heavyweight and light heavyweight, I can't fathom out why there's a 55-pound weight limit, or 55-pound discrepancy between two weight classes. It's absolutely absurd, especially when you're talking about 170. I know there's a lot more competition between the 150 and the 175 sort of them ranges. There's a lot more diluted competition there, so you need to maybe have a more disparity with 170, 170, or 170, 180, 155, 165, 175, etc. You can see why you'd need a couple more, but I think there's other weight classes that need to be developed before we start, finding the minute details in weight classes. But prediction-wise, I'd say with Francis in 2, or Ciryl probably over the distance. And I do kind of want to see Francis retain that title and just see where this story can go and see what the next chapter is, especially with the UFC and the contract talks and potentially the journey into boxing. If he loses tonight, that's going to be even more intriguing just to see what happens. Does he stay with the UFC? Does he go to a Bellator or a PFL where he can earn $1 million a year? Pretty much. Um, it is really interesting, but I do think I just done my UFC picks before we went live, and I did actually pick Francis Ngannou to stay and still, but I'm going to say for Ciryl Gane gets the win tonight via a fourth round stoppage maybe. I can see it being a stoppage either way, and I can see it being close, but I think the longer the fight goes on, the more it sways, pardon me, into Cyryl's advantage. But who knows? It'd be interesting to see again what Ngannou comes up and where Ngannou's developed to now under the tutelage of Eric Nixick and co down at Extreme Couture. Let's have a look at the rankings actually before we move on to the flyweight title. Of course, we've got a two title. I'll do is one interim, one undisputed. Tonight, obviously, we've got Stipe still in the wings, still to come back. There's John Jones in the wings looking to fight and maybe, return this year. Is he going to be in the crowd tonight, of course? There's a possibility he turns up tonight in California, of course, in Anaheim at that Honda Center. Derrick Lewis is coming off the back of an impressive win against Chris Dakaus, although he's fighting Taito Ivasa. You've got Alexander Volkov versus Tom Aspinall. You've got Curtis Blades in there. Really, Curtis Blades should probably fight Stephen Miocic for a sort of number one contenders bout, because, of course, Francis Ngannou has beaten Stipe once, beaten Curtis Blades twice. So really, either Stipe needs to get that trilogy bout with Francis, should Francis win tonight. Or if Ciryl wins, maybe you could do Ciryl versus Stipe, who knows? You could certainly make up that fresh matchup. But if Ciryl wins, his next fight has to be in Paris in France. The MMA factory deserve it. They've been bubbling away with Francis Ngannou, and then now Ciryl Gane's doing the same thing as well. And they've got a couple more guys fighting out of France now, especially with the legalization. And of course, you've got Aries Fighting Championship that Fernando Lopez is heading, I believe. They're doing wonders in Europe as well. Obviously, they're coming up to their third event, but it'll be interesting to see where they stack towards the end of the year. Obviously, you've got Cage Warriors as a number one European competition. You've got KSW. Also, and you've got Brave CF, which is more your Bahrain's, your Middle Eastern countries there, and Russia, of course. But they're slowly coming over towards more centric and Western Europe, also. So it'll be interesting to see where Aries stack up with the rest of those. But yeah, I think Ciryl Gane comes away with the heavyweight title tonight. And we're going to have a conversation about where Francis Ngannou's future lies. But, there's also a good possibility Francis does what Francis does and gets this job done inside 2 minutes and becomes maybe the Mike Tyson legitimately of MMA. Now let's look at the flyweights. Of course, we've got the trilogy between Brandon Moreno and Deiveson Figueiredo. First fight happened just over a year ago in December at UFC 256. Of course, there was a draw. Deiveson Figueiredo lost a point that night, so I believe the point loss was the reason why from the draw. I believe I had it 3-2 for Deiveson Figueiredo, who would have come away with the unanimous decision win, of course. And then, of course, at UFC 262, 262, I believe it was. We saw the rematch, of course, and Brandon Moreno come away with the win of that, of course. And it was UFC 263 back in June, of course. Brandon Moreno submitting Deiveson Figueiredo in the third round with that submission rear naked choke. Of course, on the night, Brandon Moreno looked absolutely fantastic. But how is he going to bounce into this trilogy fight, being the champion rather than the challenger now for the first time? We've seen the likes of Rose Namajunas, who's a top competitor. She crumbled that first time being champion. Robert Whittaker's come out and said he's had problems, as being the champion, of course, and overtraining and that pressure of becoming champion a little bit different to the pressure of someone who's challenging. Of course, as a champion, you've got the whole division targeted at you, while you're as a challenger, you're targeting the champion, but you might only have 2 or 3 guys on your radar, so to speak, to get ready for on your way to become a champion. So how's Brandon Moreno going to deal with that? I think, looking at the embedded series and looking, at his interviews, etc. as a whole, he seems quite chilled, relaxed. It doesn't seem like the event's getting too much for him, or the pressure of being champion is too much to him. So I think we're going to see a pretty normal Brandon Moreno in the sense that, he's a fun guy to watch. He's a fun competitor to watch. You can clearly see he's the top 3 of this division. You've got Askarov, Kai Kara France coming in the 4th, in my opinion. And you obviously got Perez and Pantoja. But you can definitely see that Brandon Moreno and Deiveson Figueiredo are at the top of this division right now. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Of course, this is the first fight, or first trilogy, where it's been back to back to back, and there's been no breaks in between competitors and fights. So that's an interesting one as well. I thought that would have happened before, to be fair. We've had some close fights, obviously. We had the Conor and Dustin trilogy, but that was over, 6-7 year period. And it was, we've had Stipe and DC in recent times. We could have Nate and Conor in a couple of months as well, but of course, that's a 6-year waiting period as well. But Brandon Moreno, first Mexican-born champion, of course, he made history, and I think this fight, for a lot of people, it's become a lot closer as we go up to the fight. I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, we're going, Brandon Moreno is going to win this fight. He's going to do it again. He's too much of the Figueiredo. But Figueiredo's looked absolutely ripped. He's looked dialed in. Of course, he's fighting under Henry Cejudo now at fight ready. So how's he going to, how's he going to switch up there? We know Henry Cejudo is a fantastic, former flyweight champion himself. He's got that wrestling background. How's Deiveson Figueiredo going to put that into his game plan? We saw the changes between the first fight between Rose Namajunas and Zhang Weili and the second fight. And obviously Zhang Weili was training under Henry Cejudo as well. And by the sounds of it, learning a lot of things for the first time in terms of setups and, syncing the striking and the grappling and the wrestling all together as one whole piece rather than a staggered sort of approach, I guess you could say. So how's Deiveson Figueiredo going to come away from that? Deiveson Figueiredo's obviously come out and said, he's preparing to take Brandon Moreno's head back to Cejudo because I believe Moreno was training with Cejudo up until the Benavidez fight, I believe, where he switched and helped Benavidez to Cejudo. I believe that's the beef that Deiveson Figueiredo's drawing for this fight. But he looks in great shape. He made 124. Of course, there was talks about him, struggling to make weight. He missed weight against Joe Benavidez. He was quite particularly ill, I believe, last time. He was very late making weight. I think he only had a couple of minutes when he stepped onto the scales in the rematch at 263. And of course, I believe after 256, where he beat Brandon Moreno, he was pretty ill as well the night before. So this could be his last fight at flyweight before he moves up to bantamweight. But again, he's moved camp. He's been working with the PI a lot more scientifically focused on his career at the moment to be able to make the 125-pound limit. But again, let's have a look at the tail of the tape. 19-5-2 up against 22-1. 2-inch height advantage there for Brandon Moreno, and also a 2-inch reach advantage for him also. Both of them are pretty equal in that leg reach, of course, about 38 inches. So it's a very closely anticipated contest. And as I mentioned previously, since it's got closer, it's been more difficult to decide who you think is going to win this one. It is a truly fantastic trilogy, and probably something this flyweight division needed. It was only a couple of years ago, three and a bit years ago maybe, that it was talk about this division being shut down. And we would have missed out on the likes of Pantoja and Bontorin and Kai France and Cody Garbrandt moving down to 125. Would have missed these fun fights that we're seeing take place and take control at the moment. I still believe the bantamweight division right now is the best division in MMA, and has been for the last maybe year or two. But flyweight's having some fun itself at the moment, and these two have been a main reason for that with their trilogy in there. It's been quite a it's not been a trilogy with bad blood really. It's been a trilogy of quite two fierce, close rivaled competitors and close skilled competitors. It's going to be interesting tonight. If Deiveson Figueiredo wins, he could easily make a fourth bout because it'd be 1-1 with a draw in the first one. So he could definitely go around again, especially with Askarov taking on Kai France, I believe in March. It might be sooner than that. I don't remember off the top of my head when that fight was dated for. But it definitely could be time to make a fourth rubber match to get an ultimate winner. But of course, if Brandon Moreno wins tonight, there's no need for that at 2-0. And obviously, you've got Pantoja there, you've got Alex Perez there. But I think the next challenger will be out of Kai France or, of course, Askarov, who probably deserves a title shot himself now, third in this division. Let's have a look at the rankings also, actually. We've got Brandon Moreno, of course, Figueiredo champion at number 1. Askarov, we've got Pantoja, Perez, Brandon Royval came out with a win, didn't he, recently? against Bontorin, of course. We've got Kai France, who beat Cody Garbrandt viciously at 269. We've got Bontorin, of course, coming off that loss to Ryval, so he's going to need a couple more. We've got David Dobrak coming up to this top 10 now. He's making his way through this division. And, of course, you will have, of course, starting in March, of course, Mohamed Mokaev making his debut. So I expect him to be in this top 10 come the end of the year. If not on the outskirts of that 12 or 11 maybe. But it's going to be a good year for Mokaev. It's going to be a good year for the flyweights also. So yes, I am going to go with... I think Brandon Moreno's got enough to do it. But I wouldn't be surprised if Figueiredo comes out and looks like the Figueiredo we saw in the first fight between the two very closely matched bout. I do believe it goes over 5 rounds. I think this one could be a war fight, the night bonus worthy. Whereas the main event, I can see the win again, a performance of night bonus, but I don't see it being a close, a bout worthy of fight at night. Whereas I can see this one being a lot more closely matched. And no, it's the perfect co-main event for the heavyweights. It's fast paced. It's two guys that are relatively well liked, well known, and it's one of those fights where you're kicking it off, going, that's a perfect main event for the heavyweight bout, which could go either way. I think with these two in the heavyweight bout, it should be quite a fiercely edgy of seat contest. But we know with the heavyweights, sometimes, especially with two power hitters, two absolute monsters, they can always look at each other with not fear but reservedness in terms of throwing their strikes and not wanting to get hit. We've seen that being directed to Ciryl Gane, especially with the Rosenstruck and Volkov decisions, that there was a not a distaste for the lack of action, but people want to see more of the risk, I guess, from Ciryl Gane to get the knockout, to get the finish. But of course, he knows his skill set, and his job at the end of the day is to go in there and win, not impress us. And if he wins tonight, he's going to naturally impress us anyway. But I don't think that one's going to be fight tonight. I think, again, the winner will walk away with a performance of the night bonus. But I think Brandon Moreno and Figueiredo will be fighting a night bonus worthy, and I think that goes over 5 rounds. And we see Ann Steele from Brandon Moreno with maybe a split decision, but I say more so unanimous decision win for the Mexican-born champion. Of course, we've got Miguel Pereira fighting Andrei Fijallo. Before that, you got Cody Starman versus Saidin Magomedov in the 135-pound division. Absolute cracking division, of course. You got Michael Morales versus Trevor Giles at 170. Trevor Giles coming in and looking very good when he made weight yesterday. So how's he going to look tonight? I think, it's a big fight for him. Coming up against an undefeated prospect out Michael Morales, who I believe is coming through Brandon Moreno's gym. There's 4 competitors tonight coming through that gym. Genaro Valdez is one of them. There's one more as well. I believe it might be Silvana Juarez is coming out of that gym also. And there'll be one more on that card also. So yes, we've got Jaime Barcelos versus Victor Henry again at the 135-pound division. I believe that's in fact opening the card. That's a cracking fight. Barcelos, very fast-paced, very very exciting fighter. He took a long time out of the cage, but he came back against Valiev, lost the majority decision, but he looked fantastic. This is a fight that was meant to happen back in December 2021, but it's been rescheduled. This is the third date that it's been given. Of course, it was meant to take place last week. So it depends. It'll be interesting to see how that has played out. But unfortunately for Barcelos, he's had a lot of fights being cancelled. He had 3 prior to that Valiev loss, and he thought he only had 1 fight in 2020, so he's lacking that little bit of competitive edge, I guess, in the sense that he's not been in there to do it and not pick up those minutes in the octagon. Whereas Victor Henry, he had 1 fight in 2021 against Albert Morales, where he won by the second round. But again, he's not someone who's been very active. He was more active in 2020, having 2 fights, 1 win, 1 loss. So yeah, it's a good fight in the 135-pound division. It's a cracking fight to open up this card with. As we know, this card got absolutely, massacred. We lost Jared Cannonier versus Derek Brunson. We lost Greg Hardy versus Alexei Olenek. We lost Vivian Araújo versus Alexa Grasso. We lost Mossa Ivaloa versus Ilia Topuria. That was the original fight. Of course, Ivaloa withdrew, and then Topuria had to withdraw because of weight cutting issues yesterday against Charles Jourdain. So we did lose some big names and some potentially fantastic fights, but it's a good night of fights. You've got Jack Della Maddalena You got Pete Rodriguez in the 160-pound division. Closing out the prelims, I believe you got Tony Gray versus Simon Oliveira. Matt Fedora versus Valdez that we mentioned. Vanessa Dempopoulos versus Silviana Gomez Juarez. And of course, opening the card, you've got Jasmine Judovicius versus Kay Hansen. That's an interesting fight as well. 125, you've got 7-4 Kay Hansen coming in, I believe, making her flyweight debut. A lot of the fights, her fight back in 2020 against Corey McKenna, where Corey McKenna was making a UFC debut. It was a close fight, but she did lose on the scorecards. But she was on a 3-fight win streak prior to that also. Over 2 of those fights being addicted. She beat Xinyu Frey on her debut, of course. But she's moved up to 125. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. But yes, I will leave it there, guys, because the fights are about to get out of the way. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you've got Francis Ngannou or Ciryl Gane walking away with the heavyweight championship of the world. Baddest man on the planet. Is this potentially Francis Ngannou's last night in the octagon? I don't think it will be. But if he loses and he hasn't got a fight left on his contract, it'll be interesting to see what path he takes, whether he does maybe try boxing or, I don't know. I don't know where he would go after this. Maybe PFL or Bellator and pick up titles there and a better payday for sure. But yeah, I'm going to leave it there, guys. Also, let us know what you think about Brandon Moreno versus Deiveson Figueiredo, who walks away with the titles there. But yeah, I'm going to leave it there, guys. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Make sure to drop this video a like and comment your predictions down and your thoughts of the UFC 270 down below. And I'll see you guys on the next video.